In this tutorial, I'll be demoing how to set up local save data using a database, working with the Room library. I'll be working in Android Studio using Kotlin and XML. I will be sort of loosely following the steps in the Android Room with a View code lab, which is Google's step-by-step instructions for setting up the Room library to use with a database. A little bit of setup that needs to happen in order to be able to use the Room library. There are some changes to make to the build.gradle file for the project and the build.gradle file for the module. That's these two files over here. Rather than explaining every line of this, I am including in the comments some two text documents that you can open up that has what you need to copy and paste, and just basically replace whatever is in either of these with what is in those two documents. Once you are done, you will need to sync this, and this may take a moment or two to sync the Gradle project. And once that is finished, we can go ahead and close these two files. We won't need to use them again. To get started making our database, we need to first create an entity which will represent the things that we're going to have in our database. So I'm going to make a new Kotlin file here in my project. This is going to be a class, and I'm going to call it Word. So we're going to have words that we're storing in our database. And so this will be the entity, and we denote this using @entity. And then in parentheses here, we give it some information. We can give it a table name to use, and this is what will be displayed in our database when we view it. So this will be called, Word table will be the name of my my table when I set up my database. This is going to be a data class. It is for working with data, so it makes sense for it to be a data class. And we are going to, I'm going to get rid of these open and close curly brackets, and instead I'm going to have just open and close parentheses. And inside of here, I'm going to make a primary key and a column info. For the column info, I'm going to say name equals word. So this will be the name of my column. And then I'm going to say val word, and this is going to be a string. So our word is going to be a string. Now this first part here at primary key, I could specify a primary key separate from this, but by just having the primary key and then the column info, this will cause the word to be the primary key for itself. Next, we're going to create a data access object, or a DAO, which is going to allow us to interact with our database. And I'm going to once again create a new Kotlin class. This will be called Word DAO, and we will annotate this at the top with DAO. And this class, this is actually not going to be a class. Instead, this is going to be an interface. And now inside of here, I'm going to add some queries that we can do to our database. So I'm going to have a query that will select. And this is actually SQL that we're writing here. So this is going to be from Word table. That's the name of our table that we made previously. And order by word. So this will sort it alphabetically and ASC. So this will be in ascending order. And this is for a function which will be called get alphabetized. Alphabetized words. And so get alphabetized words will return a list of word. I have just noticed my annotation at the top did not auto import and it's giving me an error. It's because I have misspelled it. This should be DAO. And now it will automatically import because I have automatic imports turned on. If it does not automatically import for you, you can hover over any of these things and click the import button. All right, so the next one I'm going to do is insert. And this will be, we're going to use on conflict equals on conflict strategy dot ignore. So what this means is if there is a conflict, it's going to ignore the new one, so it won't insert something that already exists. This is going to be a suspend function, which means that it can be paused or resumed, and so it works with coroutines. So this is going to be called insert, and I will insert a word. And the last one is going to be another query. This is going to be a delete from word table. And this is once again going to be a suspend function. And we'll call this one delete all. So this will delete all of the words that are currently in our table. And I've still misspelled insert. All right, so these are our queries for our table. Now I'm going to change this list. I'm going to add around it flow. And what this will do is this will allow it to observe changes to the database. And so this will update when there are changes made. And it will give us several options for import. And the one we want is coroutines. So Kotlin X coroutines.flow. Next, we're going to set up the database itself. So we are going to create another class file called word room database. And at the top of this one, I'm going to add the annotation database. And this class, this is going to be an abstract class. So I'm going to make this public and abstract. To my database annotation, I am going to add entities equals, and this is going to be an array of the word class that I created. And it also requires a version number. I'm going to give this version equals 1 and an export schema. And I am going to give it export schema equals false. This just reduces some of the things that we would need to do later and makes things a little bit simpler. So we're not going to worry about that one too much right now. Now inside of here, I am going to make a private variable instance. And I'm going to add above this, I'm going to add the annotation volatile, which what this means is that when this is written to, it becomes available to other threads. So this is going to be of type word room database, and this can be null. So we use the question mark to indicate it can be null. And in fact, when we first create it, it is going to be null. Now we're going to create a function called get database. And this needs a context. And this returns a word room database. So this is the return type. All right, so inside of this function, so I'm going to just go straight to my return. And what I'm going to return in here is the instance, and if it is, this will determine if it is null, it will create the instance, and if it is not null, it will return the instance that exists. And before I get too far with this, I actually have just realized that all of this, starting up at my my volatile private var, all of this actually needs to be inside of a companion object. This makes it so there can only be one instance of it that ever exists. So this is all going to be a companion object. So I'm going to put my close curly bracket down there. So now all of this is contained within a companion object. So back to my return here. So I'm going to make this synchronized. And this is going to be val instance equals room dot database builder. So if it does not already exist, if it is null, then I'm going to build it. So this is going to take a context, and I'm going to give it the application context. It is important that this receives a context that lives longer than a fragment or an activity. And it also needs the word room database as a class. And then lastly, I'm going to pass it a string word database. And then at the end of this parenthesis here, the last thing we need here is .build. And I seem to have misplaced a closed parenthesis here. So there should have been a closed parenthesis around this one. And I somehow gained an extra closed parenthesis down here. So let's get rid of that. And then we need to set our instance equal to this lowercase instance. So that's this one here. And then this last thing down here, instance, this is actually what we are returning. So this last line here is the return. Now I'm going to fix a couple of typos here. So I misspelled return. And this error is a type mismatch. So I need my abstract class word room database to extend from room database. And this needs an open and close parentheses. And then I'm also going to add up here at the top, I am going to add an abstract function called word DAO, which is going to return a word DAO. So this is the word DAO type object. Next, we're going to create a repository, which will just help keep things organized when we are trying to communicate with our database. And so this is going to be word repository. And this class is going to take a private val word DAO. And we're going to have another variable called all words. And we're going to use this flow again. And this is going to be, once again, a list of word. And I'm going to set this equal to word DAO dot get alphabetized. So this dot get alphabetized word, this comes from our word DAO. And so this is this function get alphabetized words, and it returns a flow list of word. And that is exactly what we are using here. Now I do need to also import this again, and remember we do want to use the Kotlin coroutines flow. I'm going to add another function here, and I'm going to annotate this with worker thread. And this is going to be another suspend function, so it can be paused and restarted. And I'm going to call this one insert word word, and then this will call word DAO dot insert, and it will be that word there. So this repository allows us to communicate through our DAO, and so this is calling this insert function here. So our word repository calls our get alphabetized function, and it also calls our insert function. So next we're going to create a view model for working with our data so that we can keep our data interactions separate from our UI. So I'm going to create another Kotlin class. This one is going to be called Word View Model. And this is going to take a private val called repository, which is going to be of type word repository. And it is going to extend from view model. So inside of here, we're going to have a variable called all words, and this is going to be a live data list of words. And this will be, we're going to set this equal to our repository dot all words dot as live data. So this repository dot all words, so this is the repository that we are taking up here, which is our word repository. So that is this one here, and this is the all words that we're calling. So that is how things are getting moved around in between these files. And so we're calling that all words, and then we're going to take that in as live data. Next, we're going to have a function. I'm going to do another insert word. And this is going to use view model scope. So we're going to actually make this happen as a coroutine. Now, sort of behind the scenes, anytime anything is reading and writing from the database, because we're using Room actually requires that these things run in a coroutine. So we are doing that to fulfill that requirement. So we're just going to call repository dot insert, and we're going to insert the word in question, which is this word right here. Next, I'm going to add a Viewmodel Factory. So I'm going to create another class down here, and this will be Word Viewmodel Factory. And this takes a private val repository as well as Word repository. And this extends from viewmodel provider dot factory. Now in here, we're going to override a function. This is going to take a view model here. And this is called create. And in parentheses, we will say model class as class of T. This T is for working with generics in Kotlin. So if you want to look more into how generics work, that is what we're using the T for. So now inside here, we're going to add an if check for model class dot is assignable from word view model. And we'll do this as class.java. And if this is true, then we are going to return word view model repository as T. And because our return is happening inside of an if condition, we have to do something if that doesn't work out. So we will throw an illegal argument exception. which will be unknown Viewmodel class. Okay, so now we have our Viewmodel and our Viewmodel Factory set up to work with our data. So now we can work on how all of this is going to be displayed on the screen. And so for this, we are going to set up a Recyclerview, which will allow us to display our words on a screen in a scrolling list. So I'm going to create a new XML layout file down here under res. I'm going to right click here and create a new layout resource file. I'm going to call this Recyclerview underscore item. And I'm going to be working in the code view for this. And since the purpose of this tutorial is not really to talk about how to set up a Recyclerview, I am just going to copy and paste some things in here. So I'm going to set up my Recyclerview item to have a text view in it. So this is just setting up a margin, width, and adding some padding, and setting it as large text, and specifying the height and the background color. Next, we're going to set up the main activity XML file. And I'm going to copy and paste some XML in here as well. I'm going to replace this text view with a couple of things. I'm going to have a Recyclerview widget, and I'm going to use a floating action button, or FAB. And this floating action button, this is going to have an image source, and you'll see that it is red because I have not imported this image yet. So I'm going to go ahead and import the image that this floating action button is going to use. I'm going to come over here to my drawables, and I'm going to choose new vector asset. And on this little clip art button here, I'm going to type add, and I'm going to use this plus button here. And you'll notice here the name, this is the name that it should say in here. So if yours shows up different, then whatever this name is, that is what you should type in here. And we'll hit finish, and now that red line has gone away. To finish setting up our Recyclerview, we need an adapter. So I'm going to create another Kotlin class. This is going to be our word list adapter. And this class is going to extend from list adapter. And in here, I will give it a word and word view holder, which we will create in a moment. And then in parentheses here, I'm going to type words comparator. And again, we'll fix this in a moment. So inside of here, we're going to override the function on create view holder, and we'll give it parent, view group, and view type will be int, and this will be of type word view holder. Inside here, I'm just going to return word view holder dot create parent. And the next one is I'm going to override the function on bind view holder, which will take word view holder and a position as int. And for this, we'll have a variable called current get item position. This is all just to set up the Recyclerview. So next we'll do holder.bind current.word. All right, now we have our word view holder class, which will take a view called item view. And this extends from Recyclerview view holder. And we'll pass it the item view. And inside of here, we're going to have a variable called word item view, which is a text view. And this will be set equal to item view dot find view by ID, and the ID that we want is text view. So this is going to be referring to this text in our Recycler item view XML file. So this text view here, that is the ID that we are looking for right here. And then we need a bind function. And this text is a string. The question mark means that it can be null. And we'll set word item view dot text equal to text. So that is this text here is what we are setting, the text that we are using, and we are setting that to the text that is in our recycler view. So that's how all those things are moving back and forth. So the next thing we're going to have inside of here, this is all still inside of the word view holder. We're going to add a companion object. And inside of the companion object, we're going to have a function called create, which has a view group and returns a word view holder. And we'll create a variable in here that is a view. And we'll do layout inflator dot from parent dot context. And this will be dot inflate. And in here we will pass it the layout for our recycler view item. And parent and false. And then lastly, we're going to return the word view holder. And now outside of our word view holder class, so down here after this curly bracket, but before our end curly bracket, so we're not all the way at the end, but we're just right after this word view holder, we are going to make another class called words comparator, which extends from diffutil dot item callback of word, and then inside of here we will override the function are items the same, and this has filled some things in here for me. So it filled in word, new item as word, and then it returns a Boolean, and then it gave me a to-do that I need to implement this, and I am going to return old item equals new item. So in Kotlin, the 3 equals signs, this compares if these are actually the same object. The double equals sign generally checks if 2 things are equal, but if you want to know if the actual objects themselves are the same, you can use the 3 equals sign. And then we're going to override our contents the same, and it filled in inside the parentheses for me again. And so here I'm going to return old item dot word equals new item dot word. So this time I only need to use the 2 equal signs because I just need to know if the word here is the same, which is a string. However, the old item and the new item, because it is from a data class, that is why we need the 3 equal signs to check if those 2 objects are the same. All right, so most of my red has gone away now, but I do see there is still an issue up here at the top, and I've realized that one of the auto imports actually imported the wrong one. This list adapter here, I actually wanted the recycler widget list adapter, and now I can see that I have misspelled position. I actually misspelled it up here, so I'm going to fix that typo. And now all of my red is gone, so I've fixed all of the issues. One more typo here. I actually have an extra set of parentheses. All right, now we should be good. All right, so the next thing that we need to do to finish off setting up our recycler view is we just need to edit our main activity. We need to add into our onCreate function. We need to add a variable for our recycler view, and we'll set this to find view by ID of type Recyclerview, and then in parentheses in here we give it r.id.Recyclerview, and we're gonna have another variable. This will be for our adapter, and this will be a word list adapter. Now we'll do Recyclerview dot adapter equals adapter. So this Recyclerview here, that's this variable we just created here, and we're accessing its adapter, and we're setting that equal to this adapter that we just created right here. And I have added another typo in here. Adapter. Spell that correctly. Okay. And then we need our Recyclerview dot layout manager, and we'll set this to linear layout manager of this. And now we should be good to go to test out, just to make sure the visual layout works and to make sure that nothing is broken before we finish setting up our database. So I'm gonna open up my emulator, and I'm just going to hit play to test this out. All right, so I have this set up. My button doesn't do anything, so I'm not actually doing anything with the database yet, but it runs, so nothing is broken right now. So, and I can see that my layout setup worked. Let's set up our repository and the database. I am going to create another Android class for this. So I'm going to create an Android class called Words Application. And this is going to extend from application. And I'm going to create my database. And we're going to use by lazy. What this means is so that it is not created until it is needed. So it doesn't get created when the app launches. Instead, it gets created the first time it is used. So this is going to be of type word room database. And we're going to do .get database. And it needs a context, so we're going to use this. And we're also going to create our repository. Also by lazy. and this will do Word repository. And we will pass it the database Word DAO. Next, we need to add this Words application to our Android manifest. So I'm going to open my Android manifest file, and right up here at the top under the word application, right, the very first thing, I'm going to add Android name equals dot, and it automatically fills in the recommendation for me. So we're going to do dot words application. That's the only change we're going to make to our Android manifest file for now, so I'm going to go ahead and close that. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to go back to our Word Room database. So let me reopen this back up. So now in our Word Room database, here we have our get database function. We're going to add a coroutine scope here. So I'm going to add a comma after context. So this will go inside here. And this is going to be scope coroutine, scope. There we go. And I'm just going to get rid of this extra space here. Okay, so now, because I was calling my get database function in my Words application, now where I call that, you'll see there's a red squiggly line because I now need to pass it a scope. So I'm going to add up here above, val application scope equals coroutine scope, and in parentheses I'm going to put supervisor job. And now I have a variable called application scope, which I can pass here to this get database function. Now we're ready to populate our database, which we're going to do from the Word Room database. So in here, I'm going to add, above my companion object, I'm going to add a private class called Word Database Callback. And this is going to take a private val scope, a coroutine scope, and this class will extend from room database dot callback. And inside of here, I'm going to override the function on create. And this is going to get past a support SQLite database. And the first thing we need to do is call the super.onCreate function. And then we're going to set up an instance. Let is a scope function that lets you execute a block of code on an object. And I'm going to add in here, we're going to do database and this over arrow. So this is setting this up as a Lambda function. And we are going to launch a coroutine here. And then inside of this coroutine, we can populate our database. I haven't set up this function yet, but I will set this up in a moment. So we're going to have a populate database function. And it's going to take database dot word DAO. And here I need to import for launch. and then I am going to set up this populate database. So this is going to go after our onCreate function. So this is going to go down here. We will mark this as suspend so that we can call it from a coroutine, and this will be populate database, and it's going to take a word DAO and then inside here, first thing we're going to do when we populate our database is we want to delete all before we do anything else. So we're starting with a clean empty database, and then we can set up a few starter words. So I'm going to make a word hello, and then we will do word DAO dot insert. So we're going to insert this word. Now we can reuse this word variable, set it equal to a new word. We'll do world and word DAO dot insert, and we'll insert that word. All right, so just going to come back up here real quick and catch my typos. So this should have been database, and now that fixes our red line. All right, so now we have our initial population of our database set up. So when we first create our database, we'll delete anything that was in there previously, and we will add hello and world. Now we need to set up this to call this from our companion object. So down here, just before the build, I'm going to add add callback, and we'll put word database callback, and in parentheses scope. And I'm just going to add a new line down here so that this comes down to a new line. All right, so next we're going to make a new activity that will pop up when we hit the plus button. Remember, we had a little plus button on our screen. That is how we're going to add a new word. So we have some starter words, but we want to be able to allow the user to add their own words to the database, and so we can see the database gets updated. So to do this, I'm going to go up to File, New, and Activity, and I'm going to choose Empty Activity, and I'm going to name this New Word Activity. And this has created a new word activity Kotlin file and also an XML file. So I'm going to start with the XML file, and I'm going to copy and paste the XML in here. So we're going to have a edit text box for the user to type into, and then we're going to have a button which they can use to save their word. Now in our new word activity Kotlin file, we're going to add up at the top before our onCreate function, we're going to add a private late init variable called edit word view, which is going to be an edit text. And then after our set content view, we're going to do edit word view equals find view by ID, and this will be r.id dot edit word. This is the ID of the edit text box here. Next, we're going to have a button, which will be find view by ID of type button, and this will be r.id dot button save, and that is the button ID here. Then we're going to add a listener for this button. So this button will get set on click listener, and we'll do val reply intent. This is an intent, and if text utils dot is empty, and oops, I have too many parentheses. And this will be edit word view dot text. So this is looking at the text that was actually entered into the box. And if there is nothing there, then we're going to set results activity dot result canceled and reply intent. Somehow I got too many parentheses again. Now we'll do else, and inside of our else we'll have val word equals edit word view dot text dot to string. So if they did enter a word, then we're going to store that word, and then we're going to do reply intent dot put extra. This you might remember from the previous video. The put extra is used to pass values when you launch a new activity from an intent. So we're going to do put extra, and this is going to be extra reply and word. Then we will set result activity dot result OK, and reply intent, and then lastly we will call finish. And now I need to create outside of my onCreate function, I'm going to create a companion object, which will be a const val, and this is the extra reply that I used up here, and this is going to be equal to, in quotes, com.example.android.wordlist SQL.reply. So now we have our new word activity set up, and now we can go back to our main activity and finish this one up so that it will allow us to get to the new word activity. So I'm going to add up at the top above on create, I'm going to add a private val new word activity request code equals 1, and I'm also going to add another private val. This will be word view model by view models. And in here, I am going to put Viewmodel Factory application as words application dot repository. And so all of that goes above my onCreate function. And then now inside my onCreate function, I'm going to add in here word view model dot all words dot observe. And I'm going to set owner equal to this. And we'll do words. And we'll do words.let. Adapter dot submit list. So this owner equals, this was an older way of doing this, and we actually don't need this anymore. So this will now just sort of happen automatically. And next we can set up our floating action button, which we'll do down here. Val, I'm going to call it fab floating action button equals find view by ID. And the type in here is floating action button. And the ID from our XML file is fab. Now we can set an on-click listener for this. And we're going to set up an intent. And we'll go this at main activity. And we'll do new word activity as class. And we will start activity and pass the intent and new word activity request code. That is this one up here, if I have spelled it correctly. We need to add in here this start activity. This actually needs to be start activity for result. All right. And this is actually deprecated, but that's okay. The strike through means that eventually it will stop working, but it'll still work for us for right now for what we're trying to do. And if it bothers you to see a strike through, you can actually suppress the warnings for deprecations. So now it won't include a strike through in it. So the last thing that we're going to do is we are going to override one more function down here outside of onCreate. I'm going to override on activity result. And this is going to take a request code as int and a result code, also an int, and intent data as intent. And of course we will call our super dot on activity result. And it auto-filled some stuff in here, but I actually want this to be intent data. And now we're going to do if request code equals new word activity request code, and if our result code equals activity dot result okay. So if both of these things, then we're going to do our intent data dot get string extra, and we'll get our new word activity dot extra reply, and then let and reply with the over arrow. And now we can do val word equals word reply. And our word view model dot insert word. And when I was typing get string extra, it automatically accidentally filled in get string array extra, and I actually just meant get string extra. So now we're just getting a string, and then we can make that into a word, and then we can insert that word. So that is our if. So let's move on and add an else. So what happens if we don't get a word back? If it doesn't work out, we can make a toast dot make text, and we're going to use application context here, and then the message we're going to print is word is empty, and I'm going to make this toast length long, and then we'll do dot show. So this is what we'll do if it doesn't work out, if we don't get a word back from the text box, then we will pop up this little text message. So now we are good to go to test this out. So let's go ahead and run our application. And here we see our words, the ones that we have automatically populated. We have hello and world. If I hit the plus button, if I don't enter anything and I hit save, this is that toast message that I just set up. So it says word is empty. If you open your app inspector, and it takes a moment to load this in, but we should be able to view our database. So here's our database. Remember, way back at the beginning, we called it word table. If I double click on this, here I can see my words, hello world. Now if I hit the plus and I add a new word, I'll just say test. And I'll save that. Now that has populated up here on my screen. And they are sorted alphabetically, so it will insert it where it goes alphabetically. It may not automatically show up down here, and you can just hit the refresh button so you can see it is being added to your database. So this down here, this is your view of the database that is on the device, and so this is being saved locally. So you could use this for something where you have an app that needs to keep track of some information after the user closes the app, and then you want, when they reopen it, you want to still have that information. So I'll go ahead and add just a few more words in here. I'll add cats and dogs and unicorn. All right, so I've got a few words in here now. So I'm going to go ahead and stop running it here, and you'll see it does not allow you to inspect the database when the app is not running. But now if I run the app again, now it still has that information. So now this is persistent data that is being saved in between uses of the app. And then once this loads in, then you can see your database is still being saved here. So this will be saved on the device. If you were to deploy this onto your phone, then every time you close and reopen the app, it would have any of the previous changes that were made. So I hope this tutorial was helpful in showing you how to set up a room database using the room library with Android and Kotlin.